Dark secrets in a child's tragedy. The case of Müslüme Yağal. In 2021, the disappearance of a 4-year-old girl named Müslüme Yağal shook Turkey to its core. She was part of a nomadic family, living in tents set up on the plains of Karaman. For most people, their story was unknown until tragedy brought them into the national spotlight. On what seemed like an ordinary day, little Müslüme vanished without a trace. Her sudden disappearance launched one of the most extensive search operations in recent years, mobilizing security forces, volunteers, and the entire country's attention. But what began as a desperate search for a missing child soon revealed disturbing secrets within her own family. Secrets that would spark outrage, debate, and a trial that divided public opinion. This is the story of Müslüme Yağal, a story of innocence lost, unanswered questions, and a nation left wondering what really happened to her. On November 10, 2021, the Yağal family was camped in a rural part of Gulnar in the province of Mersin. Like many nomadic families, they moved seasonally with their tents, their herds, and their children. Life was simple, but also fragile, exposed to nature, dependent on daily routines and bound by family ties. That morning felt no different from the others. The women prepared meals and cared for the younger children. The men tended to the goats and sheep scattered across the hillsides. For the children, the camp was both a home and a playground. They chased each other between the tents, laughed, and wandered through the fields. Among them was 4-year-old Müslüme. Family members described her as a curious and lively child, the kind who would wander off to look at a flower or follow a butterfly without a second thought. That day, she was last seen near the tents, close to where her relatives were gathered. Then, in a moment that would change everything, she was gone. At first, no one thought much of it. Children often wandered only to return minutes later. But as time passed, anxiety grew. Her parents and siblings searched the immediate area, calling her name, checking behind rocks, inside the tents, along the narrow dirt paths. Still, there was no trace. The rugged geography of the region made their fear worse. The area was surrounded by steep hills, thorny bushes, and dangerous slopes. For a small child, even a short walk could become deadly. Every minute that passed felt heavier. When the family's own efforts failed, they raised the alarm. Neighbors joined in, and soon, word reached the authorities. Within hours, local gendarmerie and search teams were on their way. What began as a family's desperate search for their little girl was about to grow into one of the most intense search operations in recent memory. The disappearance of little Müslüme quickly mobilized an extraordinary response. Within hours, gendarmerie units, AFAD, Turkey's Disaster and Emergency Management Authority, and local villagers joined the search. As night fell on the very first day, flashlights swept through the rugged terrain while relatives stood anxiously at the campsite, praying for her safe return. By the second day, the search effort had intensified. Dozens of specialized officers, supported by professional rescue teams, spread across the valleys. Helicopters circled overhead, scanning the rocky landscape from above, while drones equipped with high-resolution and thermal cameras scanned every slope and ridge. Search and rescue dogs sniffed the ground tirelessly, guided by handlers who knew the terrain well. The scale of the operation was massive. According to reports, more than 300 people took part at its peak, covering an area of dozens of square kilometers. Every valley, dry stream bed, and cave-like opening was inspected. Volunteers from neighboring towns brought food and supplies, while others joined the search lines, combing the fields shoulder to shoulder. As the days passed, the search developed its own rhythm. On the third day, hope was still alive. Many believed she might be hiding in a sheltered spot waiting to be found. By the fifth day, however, morale began to drop. The nights were bitterly cold, and survival without food or shelter seemed less likely. By the seventh day, exhaustion weighed on everyone, yet they pressed on, determined not to abandon the child. The geography of the area made everything harder. The site was surrounded by thorny bushes, steep cliffs, and deep ravines. Even experienced adults struggled to navigate the terrain. For a child, it was almost unimaginable. Teams moved slowly, marking areas they had already covered, then circling back again, unwilling to risk missing a single clue. Local villagers were deeply shaken. Some expressed disbelief, saying, "We know every path here. If she'd been around, we would have found her." Their words echoed the growing frustration. How could such a massive effort fail to reveal even the smallest trace? Meanwhile, the media began broadcasting live from the mountains. Cameras captured the endless lines of searchers, the helicopters flying overhead, and the anxious faces of family members waiting near the tents. Television anchors asked the same haunting question every night: where is little Müslüme? Across Turkey, millions of viewers followed the updates, sharing the family's hope and despair. Despite the relentless work, no footprints, no clothing, no sound of a child crying was found. After more than a week, even the most experienced rescuers were baffled. It was as if the 4-year-old had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only questions and fear. On the 10th day of the search, hope and despair collided. After hundreds of hours of effort, with more than 300 people scouring the valleys and hills, the operation seemed to be reaching its limits. Families of volunteers wondered how much longer they could continue. Then, on November 18, 2021, the devastating news broke. The body of 4-year-old Müslüme Yağal had been found. Her remains were discovered on a rocky hillside, about 7 kilometers from the family's campsite. The location stunned many. It was steep, covered with thick bushes, and difficult even for experienced adults to climb. More importantly, it was an area that had reportedly been searched multiple times before. Search dogs had passed through, teams had walked the slopes, yet somehow she had not been found. This disturbing detail would spark endless speculation in the days that followed. The scene of the discovery was heart-wrenching. Rescue workers who had spent 10 days without rest stood in silence as the body was carefully recovered. Some cried openly. Volunteers who had left their homes to help returned in shock, unable to believe that all their efforts had ended this way. Local villagers whispered among themselves, "It doesn't make sense." We searched here, news spread instantly. Television crews rushed to the site, broadcasting images of security forces carrying the small body down the mountain. Across Turkey, millions watched live as the tragedy unfolded on their screens. Breaking news headlines read, "Tragic end, little Muslim found dead, and nation in mourning." Officials suggested that her death was caused by exposure, the freezing mountain nights, combined with hunger and exhaustion. But the public was far from convinced. How had she traveled so far on her own? Why had she been found in a place already combed by search teams? Could she have been moved there later? These unanswered questions spread rapidly on social media. For the Yağal family, grief was unbearable. But at the same time, suspicion began to surround them. Neighbors, journalists, and even volunteers quietly wondered whether the tragedy was truly an accident or whether something darker had happened. The discovery closed the chapter of the search, yet it opened another, far more disturbing one: the investigation into whether Muslim's death had been the result of nature or of human hands. After the discovery of Müslüme's body, the case shifted overnight from a rescue mission to a full-scale criminal investigation. The authorities knew they had to answer the question that haunted everyone: how could a 4-year-old child die so close to her own family's tent without anyone knowing what happened? Suspicion first fell on strangers, the possibility of an outsider harming her. But quickly, attention turned inward, toward the family itself. Investigators interviewed relatives one by one, analyzing inconsistencies in their stories. The spotlight soon centered on her grandfather, Yağal. His unusual calmness during the search, contrasted with the panic of others, raised suspicion. Some villagers even recalled him making comments that seemed cold or detached. The investigation soon uncovered disturbing allegations. Journalists reported whispers of abuse within the family, particularly involving the grandfather. Stories of inappropriate behavior, silenced by fear and tradition, began surfacing in local media. Though hard to verify at first, the very idea that the child's death might be linked to long-standing abuse shattered the public's trust. Television programs dedicated entire evenings to the case. Panels of psychologists, lawyers, and social workers debated the implications. Was this the tragic accident of a child lost in the wilderness? Or had she fallen victim to darker crimes hidden within the walls of her own family? The ambiguity only intensified the public's anger. On social media, hashtags like #JusticeForMüslüme and #ProtectChildren trended nationwide. Thousands of users expressed rage not just at the family, but at the system. Why, they asked, were allegations of abuse so often ignored until it was too late? Why had no authority intervened earlier if warning signs existed? Villagers, too, were outspoken. Some told reporters if she had only wandered off, she would have been found alive. Something doesn't add up. Others shared that they had long felt uneasy about certain behaviors in the family, but were powerless to act. Their testimonies added weight to the sense that silence and fear had protected abuse for years. The forensic report, when it came, offered no clear resolution. Officials stated that no obvious injuries explained the child's death. Exposure remained the official cause, but many experts pointed out inconsistencies. If she had died from the cold, how had her body remained undetected in a thoroughly searched area? Was she alive elsewhere, only to be placed there later? These unanswered questions deepened the mystery. For the Yağal family, grief turned into suffocating scrutiny. Their private lives, once invisible to the outside world, were now dissected daily in newspapers and on television. The tragedy had moved beyond one child's disappearance. It had become a symbol of hidden abuse, systemic failure, and the devastating cost of silence. As public outrage grew, the case inevitably moved into the courts. The focus was on Müslüme's grandfather, Yağal, who was arrested and charged, not directly for her death, but for sexual abuse and related crimes within the family. His arrest alone shocked the public, transforming him from a grieving elder into the central figure of suspicion. The first hearing drew enormous crowds. Families of other child victims, activists, and ordinary citizens filled the courtroom. Some carried photographs of their own lost children, silently demanding justice not only for Müslüme, but for all. The atmosphere was tense. Every word spoken by the prosecutor was met with nods of approval, while the defense's objections sparked murmurs of anger. Outside, Television crews broadcast live coverage. Anchors described the courthouse steps as a stage for national grief. Protesters carried signs that read, "Protect our children and justice for Müslüme." Social media exploded with updates, turning the trial into a public spectacle. Prosecutors presented testimonies from family members, describing years of abuse hidden by fear and tradition. They argued that silence had enabled the grandfather's crimes and that the toxic environment around him had placed every child in danger. Some testimonies were harrowing, details of intimidation, manipulation, and the power imbalance within the family. For many observers, these accounts connected directly to Müslüme's tragedy. Even if the forensic report listed exposure as the cause of death, the prosecutors insisted that her fate could not be separated from the environment of abuse and neglect that surrounded her. The defense countered aggressively. Lawyers argued that the allegations were exaggerated, fueled by media hysteria and collective anger. They pointed to the forensic results, which did not show conclusive evidence of foul play. They claimed the prosecution was building a case on rumor and public pressure rather than hard fact. They also accused journalists of shaping the narrative unfairly. "This is not justice," one defense lawyer declared. "This is trial by television." Their words resonated with some, but to the vast majority, it sounded like an excuse. As the trial dragged on, the courthouse became a focal point of national attention. Each hearing drew larger crowds. Activists traveled from other cities to attend. At times, chants of "Justice for Müslüme" were so loud that they could be heard inside the courtroom. Police had to form barricades to manage the swelling crowds. Television debates dissected the proceedings nightly. Commentators analyzed the body language of witnesses, the tone of the judge, and even the silences between statements. For weeks, the case dominated headlines, overshadowing almost every other national story. Finally, the day of the verdict arrived. The courthouse was packed beyond capacity, with hundreds more gathered outside. Tension filled the air as the judge read the decision. Yağal was sentenced to prison on charges of sexual abuse. The courtroom erupted. Some cried with relief, others shouted in anger that the punishment was not enough. For the public, the outcome felt incomplete. Yes, a conviction had been secured, but the official cause of Müslüme's death remained exposure. How could this explanation satisfy a nation still asking, how did she reach that hillside? Why wasn't she found sooner? Was someone protecting the truth? Outside the courthouse, protesters continued chanting. Some called the verdict a victory. Others called it a cover-up. On social media, the hashtags returned. Hashtag Justice for Müslüme and hashtag Protect Children once again trended. Television commentators framed the case as a national turning point, one that exposed the dangers of silence and the failures of protection systems. The trial had ended, but the anger had not. For many, justice had been served only on paper. The unanswered questions about Müslüme's final hours remained, leaving behind a lingering wound in the nation's conscience. The story of Müslüme Yağal is one that continues to haunt Turkey. What began as the disappearance of a 4-year-old girl became a national tragedy and ultimately a painful mirror reflecting hidden issues within family and society. Her case revealed more than just the fragility of life in remote nomadic communities. It uncovered disturbing truths about abuse, silence, and the vulnerability of children who have no voice of their own. Though the courts delivered a sentence, many questions remain unanswered. How did Müslüme's body end up in an area that had already been searched? Was her death truly an accident of nature, or was it the tragic result of something darker, hidden within the very people meant to protect her? The outrage sparked by her case spread far beyond her family. In towns and cities across Turkey, vigils were held. People lit candles, carried her photograph, and prayed for justice. On social media, hashtags like #JusticeForMüslüme and #ProtectChildren trended for weeks. She became a symbol not only of her own lost innocence, but of the countless children who remain vulnerable to abuse and neglect. Her case also reignited broader debates about child protection in Turkey. Journalists and legal experts pointed to similar tragedies in recent years. Leyla Aydemir, 2018, a young girl whose disappearance and death shook the nation. Aylul Yalikara, 2018, another child victim whose story exposed deep failures in prevention. Each of these names, like Müslüme's, forced society to confront the same painful questions. Are children truly safe? Are existing laws strong enough? And are cultural taboos allowing cycles of silence and abuse to continue unchecked? For Müslüme's community, the tragedy left scars that will not fade quickly. Villagers still remember the search, the nights spent calling her name, the hope that drained away with every passing day. The Yağal family, meanwhile, must live under the heavy shadow of grief and suspicion, their private lives permanently marked by public exposure. In the end, Müslüme's story is not just about a single child. It is about the responsibility of families, communities, and entire societies to protect those who cannot protect themselves. It is about confronting silence, breaking taboos, and demanding accountability from systems that too often fail the most vulnerable. Her name has become a reminder that justice is not only about verdicts and prison sentences, but about prevention, awareness, and change. Until those lessons are learned, the haunting question will remain: what really happened to Müslüme Yağal? Every secret waits to be revealed. Every silence that carries an echo, every story is waiting to be told. This was her secret. What about yours? What do you think about this case? Share your thoughts in the comments. Every voice matters. Subscribe and step into the echoes of truth.